Welcome back, counselors. Okay, so we had a bit of time there, and now all 6 of you have gone through and done your prioritization again, looking at the big issues, and I'll just go through and explain these. When I said service delivery, doing what we say we'll do, that's about having realistic expectations about what we expect to achieve. So when we put something in the long-term plan and saying, we're going to do this, this, and this, we know we can actually achieve that. And it will be through exceptional circumstances that we can't, which we can always explain. And that becomes really important because when we get into this next bit, when we're talking about the rest of the infrastructure strategy, sometimes we can have very ambitious work programs that are just not realistic. So it's about having real-world views. Financial prudence, we all know that because we had the wonderful presentation from James and Jason on financial prudence. Levels of service, yes, making sure that we get them right and that we're delivering on them. Aging infrastructure, very appropriate, because that's the reality of the world that that you are all trying to navigate and make decisions in. And of course, roading, which is indicative due to the conversations we've just had for the last couple of hours. I'm going to invite up to the table Laura Rich to sit with Andrew. Laura is the strategy officer for water services, and she helped to prepare the activity management plans, and she's been liaising with a lot of the different characters in the water team, including the transition manager, trying to navigate how we get the best information. It's a work in progress. And we haven't quite finished all the AMPs because we're going back and revisiting what the initial ambitions were for what we can realistically achieve if it's actually council delivering all of these things, as we intend to say in our infrastructure strategy, as opposed to if it was going to be the third-party entity that had a different funding source. So I will go back to the...
So Vincy, just on this though, so...
Yes, please.
Is this, back to my question earlier, is this going to shape some of the conversations we're having with the community? Because there again, you know, how do we have a conversation on a service delivery? It's easy to have a theatre or a stadium. They're easy conversations, but challenges around having a conversation on financial prudence, levels of service, ageing infrastructure. Ageing infrastructure is probably okay, but some of them are quite hard.
They are. So what ideas did you come up with when you talked about community, talking to the community? Did you come up with any?
Well, I mean, I actually don't think it was too bad the way we did it last time. It was quite positive with some of the groups that we got in front of. It's just getting the invites out early and getting in front of people. So,
and clarifying what our messages are.
Yeah. But one of the things, I've actually pushed it higher because it's one of the things that we can have a conversation with is around affordable housing. And I don't think the title's correctly, but our housing stock, our social housing is something that we can have
Yes.
It probably needs to be reworded, but it's something that we can have a conversation with is what is the model for running that moving forward? And I know I've requested that we do a 17A review, etc. on that so we can time in for the LTP. So, yeah, I like this, but I just don't think I think we need to do more work on this part of it.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, from this side of the table, were there any things that you wanted to add around the conversations with the community?
We didn't get to the community, but just on previous experience, I think it's important to engage right across the age span, in which we have done in previous LTPs. Has gone out to high schools, out to different learning facilities in different areas throughout our district to make sure sometimes you need to go onto their turf rather than coming to us. So I think making us accessible for everyone, no matter what age they are, can look different. Like, I mean, it could be schools, it could be rest home facilities, it could be golf clubs. You know, it's trying to capture where people are and engage with them.
And go into where the community is. And it would be fair to say that as you go through your lifespan and through the age spectrum, the council means different things to different people. So for young kids, that's where the lollipop men and the high-vis vests and the road workers that they see come from, council, regardless if they are council workers or not. And as you get older and you start to appreciate how much council contributes to the community, I think that's a fair comment. Right.
Sorry, just because I haven't been involved in this process before, so when we go out and engage with the community, what sort of shape does that take? I mean, is it something similar to what we've just done?
It's really up to you how you want to do it, but what I would advocate, what we normally do is we will have a presentation of what the big issues are. That is a precursor to what's going to go into the consultation document.
Are these the big issues as we've decided they're going to be? Yes? Gotcha, okay. Yep.
And the community has the chance to give you input and feedback if they think you've missed something. That's always the case. And it's also kind of leading in, we call it preparing the ears for when the consultation document comes out. So what you're doing is you're letting them know about the state of the land. You're letting them know, hey, look, we know we have a problem with aging infrastructure. So here are some of the ways we think we want to go about addressing it. What do you think? And you start to have those really honest conversations early on in the piece. We don't have the magic pot of gold that's going to let us deliver everything you want. So this isn't like the wish list for Santa. This is about being really realistic of what we're going to do to make this community really good for now and the future, because it's about building that resilience. And every community that you go and talk to, or at every community event, just like all of you sitting around the table, everybody's got their own priorities and own agendas and what's important to them. And it's important that everybody feels heard, but not everybody's going to get the answers they are wanting to hear. And that's that delicate balance when you're in the public forum of taking the feedback, thanking people for their input without making the promises, but I'll fix that for you. Because you just can't do that. And you're not a walking CRM. You're not there to take all the complaints. Officers will be in support at all of these community events that we'll start scheduling for you. And we can actually help address some of those things. Okay.
See, if we were going to do that exercise again, I
Yes.
would like to have a conversation, because there's probably 5 things in there that could be bundled into one.
Okay.
So, for example, civic buildings. Well, I would like to see, in brackets, theatre, stadiums, art galleries, whatever. Because I think if you do too many, like just what the exercise, like it was a great exercise, I think the community would get confused. So for me, I think there's 10 topics in there that could be rolled up, and we should do that exercise again, but we need to agree what's one. So for example, there was financial prudency, there was debt levels, they're all the same. Well, they're not all the same, but they're mean
related.
the same.
Yeah,
They're
very
related. So I would love to do that exercise again when we agreed on what the 10 would be.
I'm really happy to work that through with you guys. Really happy to do
I
that.
think that is what the community wants.
I would never go out to the community with a list of 30 things.
No, I know, but I'm just saying it was excellent.
Yeah,
What I'm thinking is if we were going to do that exercise again, and actually that starts to shape what we're doing, I'd
start
like
to narrow it down.
Yeah, or bundle them.
Yeah, easy. Love to have that conversation.
So that specific example is actually how we communicate our financial strategy to the public around, and why we've got to this point, why we need to take on levels of debt to get to that point, and what it's going to look like into the future. How we actually educate people as opposed to, But it's going to be quite different. Sorry, I'll get away from this, but last one was the perfect storm in what we could talk about. We had theatre, CBD, climate change, and stadium. It's not going to be like that, so it's going to be quite different, and so we need to probably think about how we deliver what we're going to.
You had the sexy stuff last time. Well, when you're talking about a new theater and a stadium and things like that, those are easy to capture the public's imagination with and engagement. And this time it is a more difficult conversation, but it's a long overdue one, to be fair. And I think your community's very reasonable in the fact that when they know that you're really trying to do the best for them, they genuinely appreciate an honest conversation about what that's going to look like. And sometimes it means that we're not always going to have the bells and whistles. We're going to be very pragmatic and tighten our belts a wee bit. Okay. Right, so as a precursor into getting into the discussion about waters and three waters, the first thing I wanted to do was actually just introduce the link as to why councils came into being in the 1800s in New Zealand's history. It was the crossover with public health. Councils very much look after public health, which isn't something that most people recognize because they see you as a regulatory body. But historically, these have always been aligned. Initially, the focus was on quarantine and sanitary reform. Thinking back to the 1800s, pretty rough and rugged, and I've got an example of some of the legislation from back in 1869, which I'll talk about in a moment. A lot of the acts that have been passed, which have a huge bearing on how councils operate, have been reactionary. We're in a phase now where we have actually got strategic legislation having been passed. The Local Government Act was a prime example of that. It was about setting us up for the future instead of dealing with a nuisance that we had to pass legislation for. Now, TAs have an extraordinary wide range of powers that can impact on people's health. And talking about the three waters is a really key function of those. Okay. So looking at the legislation over the years, you had the Contagious Diseases Act back in 1869. Believe it or not, that was about regulating the spread of STIs. And it meant that council officers at the time could actually go up and check certain people as to whether or not they were carrying any diseases or seemed to be, and then they were put into Addington Prison, which was a women's prison at the time. So in the 1900s, you had the Public Health Act, and that focused a lot on the standard of public housing, which of course councils had a huge influence on about where they were built, how they were built, etc. The Social Security Act provided your health and social services to all New Zealanders. By the way, New Zealand is the first country in the world to have had a Public Health Act, which is something of good recognition. The 1956 Health Act, of course, gave councils powers with inspectors to address nuisances, bylaws to protect public health. And that includes nuisances not just related to waste or wastewater and things like that, but that could be noise, all kinds of things. Your Local Government Act, of course, introduced the 4 well-beings, and it was very much focused on outcomes as opposed to trying to address a problem. With the new legislation just passed, it's specified specifically on environmental limits are being put in place to protect human health. That's in the legislation. So it is actually imposing on councils or reinforcing your role is helping to address human health here. And now we move on to one prime way in which we do that. So here we have 3 waters. This is just going over the history to set the framework. We all know this. We've got the planned transition handover for July 2025, should nothing change, but we have change just on the Legally, Three Waters doesn't have to be in the infrastructure strategy. We are putting it in, though. And we'll take it out, as I said, if necessary, go into the future. So what went to the DIA when it was presented? We had a work program to the DIA of $527 million over 30 years. Now, please keep in mind, because we have actually talked about the way all councils have operated in New Zealand was through not entirely funding depreciation to its full extent, sweating out assets, which means extending them to their end of life and beyond if they were still in working order, deferring big CapEx projects or what have you. That 527 million includes some projects or activities or programs of work that are playing catch-up, but also trying to put the infrastructure in Timaru to the highest possible standard for modern technology, okay? That may not always be the most affordable or practicable thing. We're in the interest of doing what's affordable whilst protecting public health, okay? So that 527 million will include very top-of-the-line, high-standard, very advanced technology that may or may not be feasible for our ratepayers to fund.
And just to give you some further information on that, when DIA went out to all the councils at the time, and the way I would describe it is they asked the engineers for their dream, and never have engineers been asked for their dream before, because they've always operated within financial budgets. But they all delivered, and that's the number that shaped the conversation across the country, which ended up being the 180 billion that they referred to. And so the work that C4LD did with Gustalia worked out that what's sitting in the infrastructure strategies, LTPs, was around 90 billion, I think, BEAD, and based on that, actually, the analysis showed that the country was about 10 billion short, as opposed to 100 billion, and that's probably it, or 90 billion, that's probably it in a nutshell, isn't it? So if you look at that in that context, that sort of helps give some, and I mean, yeah.
Your Worship, that's exactly right. There was something like 90 billion something across the country in the LTPs, so that one was the gold-plated standard that DIA did request, and a number of people in C4LD have laboured that point, that it was what was requested by DIA incessantly, to be honest, for us to provide it, but it wasn't what was in the LTPs to meet the standards, which is about half of that.
And to be fair, if you had a government agency who said, okay, money is no option, sorry.
Just in defence of engineers a little bit there.
Oh, they were responding, agreed, they were
Yeah.
responding to direction from
We were,
the
yeah,
IA.
the direction was a unconstrained budget option.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, well, I
rather
think
than
it is
dream.
important, it was the gold-plated
Yeah.
standard that.
But one of the things we are facing is, with LTP is more recently is this steady and step increases in standards. And that is probably the key issue that we're talking about here with this LTP, is those standards are increasing in all areas of the Three Waters. So the compliance is getting more and more difficult, and that is driving our infrastructure program.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this recently, but so if standards increase to where they are now, and we don't, stormwater's still probably an unknown for 5 whatever years, so, put that to the side, but are they going to increase any further than what they currently are? My argument would be actually probably they're not, because at some point the country's got to have a conversation around what standard is affordable, because you can't just keep increasing because this country has not got enough wealth to fund to that higher standards.
I totally agree with you, Your Worship. The affordability conversation in central government has just not been had. It seems to be this idealistic view of protecting the environment to the nth degree. So, we're under a huge amount of scrutiny for our wastewater discharges now. Every overflow is almost becoming a subject of an investigation. And we all know about the heat that's on the water supplies at the moment. So luckily, we're in good shape in that respect. But in stormwater, they're going to get right down into measuring and monitoring the quality of all discharge. Where they're heading, I hope they don't go there, but that is certainly indications now.
Right, thank you. Andrew, I was going to say in support of engineers, they were asked to give exactly what they did, and you and I would be no different. So, and the quality of the information, I mean, Timaru has been praised for the quality of the data that it has provided the DIA. But now that we're actually bringing everything in-house, what we're looking at now, for the work program, there is an asset management database that actually produces the models to show the end of life of all of the assets within water supply and wastewater. I'm not sure, is stormwater included in that as well? Laura?
There is some limited inclusion of stormwater assets, the level it drills down to, there's, like pump stations have an assessment, pipe work, each individual length of pipe has assessment, but there's the odd, like maybe a connector wouldn't so much.
Right, thank you. The important thing is, even if the computer comes out and says, okay, you have this particular item here that's at the end of the life, criticality assessments are performed on them before any work is actually undertaken. So to reinforce and assess what the data has come out to say, and also because a lot of these assets have been sweated out, some of the ones that are popping up now are probably 3 years over their end of life, but they're still functioning. So there are times that instead of the asset being replaced, it is possible to do a different sort of renewal by maybe replacing some components whilst still monitoring it. Okay? So that's what's currently happening now. Now, in that work program, here were some big ticket items that were actually put in. Oh, sorry.
Lindsay, just a point, we do have Grant Hall and Andrew Lester, a new drainage water match, coming at 12:30, so we're starting to get into detail here that might be they should be present for.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll just finish this slide, and how about then we break for lunch and reconvene at 12:30?
I think it would be helpful if they were here.
Okay, yep. Right, so the big ticket items that were included in the transition plan included the water metering, which had been discussed by this council in previous years, the C-down reticulation renewals, and that was looking at $33 million over the 10 years, $6 million of it in year one, the membrane filtration, filter installation, at Claremont, which you guys are well aware of because the work's already been underway. Downlands reticulation, the small mains renewals, and a large program for reticulation renewals and upgrades over in year one. And a lot of that would be addressing some of the assets that have been sweated out. So that is the information that all went to the DIA. Now, we use that as a base source for a lot of the activity management plans and are in the process of refining that. And when Grant Hall comes and joins Laura and Andrew, we'll talk about the refinement of that large work program into what we're looking at for a council-delivered work program. So at this point, we will take our break for lunch for a half hour, and we will reconvene at 12:30. Thank you.
Thanks, Vincy. Sorry, just to leave you with a thought over lunch. So just going to average salaries for structural engineers, low 80,000, median is currently 9,750 and high is 140. So if you break that down into hourly rates, you can quite quickly do some analysis on the pros and cons versus internal and external. Leave that with you.